Hello everybody, I'm L.A. Little and this is your weekly NeoTA wrap. We take a look at these markets, we do it from a neoclassical perspective, meaning each day, each week, we ask ourselves what happened and what does it tell us about the coming days or weeks. Do the show every Sunday night, broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, archived on YouTube under the channel L.A. Little. As far as what happened, well, it was a down week, not a big loss, but a down week nevertheless. Still have gains on the year, still thrashing around basically. Nothing much has changed. And it's really not about here, but it's over there. But we will start with here, and that is on the S&P 500. The big story last week was that the S&P came back into the range. So that range, if we draw it, bring it up from about here, it depends on which range you want to draw. There's multiples. There's that one, there's one below it. But it came back in the range. It basically got out for about 4 days and then boom, right back in it. It's going to keep happening all year. You got volume expansion on Friday. You're coming down towards the end of that bar. So far, the only thing that you've gotten here is you got a test of the top, was unable to continue, right? That was the takeaway bar. Faded inside, and historically when I used to do, classical TA stuff, I would be doing this kind of a thing and, this kind of a wedge and saying, okay, whenever it breaks out of one side or the other, then it's just going to zoom. Well, I don't know if it's going to zoom because that's really not what you should be doing. You should be looking at points of significance. Where is there's something on this chart that is significant that if it breaks, then it tells me something. And if I look for that on this chart, it's fairly easy to see it on the top, and the top is up here, right? That would be back over the breakdown bar, and it would be back over the swing point high. That could get something going. You got another swing point high up there now, so you could actually get some juice to the top side. So that to me is kind of the significant bar. On the back side though, on the bottom, what's significant? There's really not much. I mean, you got some big volume bars over here, but they're kind of lost in the shuffle of what's been going on. If I want to look at something significant, I think I got to start looking for swing points, and they're all over the place on the downside. If these start to break, that would be significant. That's a ways down. Right now, this market doesn't want to give it up, so I don't know that there's anything on the downside right now that's fearful enough for us to be concerned about. If we drift on down there, then it will get a little bit more interesting. As a matter of fact, I missed one of those swing points. The highest one is right up here, so it's not too far away. So if you break that one, right, that's just one little swing point, doesn't mean anything. You break these, then it's starting to mean something. So we'll give it a little time, see what it wants to do. But right now, you got a big bar, you're trading inside of it. Doesn't really tell you much. If you look on the weekly, the test of the swing point high is what's taking place. That is of significance. So in other words, we've got a swing point high. We broke over it here, right, on this bar. Stay over at one bar. Now you're back in it. Because you came back within 6 bars, you're doing a full retest regen. That's all what should be happening. Question is can it regenerate higher, or does it generate back lower? That's the key test now. You can actually get an ABCD structure. Actually, there's a bunch of them because none of them are finishing anymore. So there's your ABCD structure there. You could actually do another one now from here back down, right? It could take it higher and take it actually much higher. But you've got, the key thing happening on this time frame, whereas on the daily you don't. And that is that you're retesting and regenerating, or at least attempting to, off that prior swing point high. Volumes are about the same, 167.2. We're doing 165 there, so you're coming back with just a little bit more volume. Nothing to be overly concerned about. So far it's holding. If that breaks, you stay under it for a week. What does that tell you? Sideways trade, right? That reconfirms the fact that this wants to do this versus that. And so that's what you're looking at on this time frame. Look at it on a monthly. It's just flattening out up here, but it still does not want to roll over, and that's after 3.5, almost 4 years of up. Pretty amazing sight, and that site just kind of continues, not giving it up. Let's move over and look at the NASDAQ, which has been the strongest group. Here's the daily chart, also inside bars the last 2 days, coming after the swing point high. That high is significant on the weekly time frame because that's where all the volume is. It's probably going to test it. It still wants to test it, and I suspect at some point it will test it. And you're so close, you got to think that test is coming. Look at it on a monthly, just keeps pushing higher. Nothing different, still where the strength is. NDX, same sort of thing, 2 inside bars. Again, weekly's got the volume on it, wants to test it. Again, on the monthly, just looks like a peachy little move to the top side. And the Russell. Now, the Russell is the small caps. Remember, about 1.5 years ago, these guys kept telling us that this market was going to struggle. That is what it did. They're telling us the same thing again. It's still not a bad situation. What I mean by that is if I go to the weekly, the Russell is still holding a breakout over here. It's tested it. Let me get it correctly there. It's tested it on the way back twice now, but still has been unable to break it down. And so far, this continues to hold. Now, it has volume off the top. That's not a good thing. In other words, this big bar was not a new high, swings lower, volume expands. That's a tough thing. A lot of times on these kinds of charts, when you get volume off the top, is these things will climb all the way back up to test it, right? Which would almost be a swing point high test, right? Hasn't gotten there, but it's trying. Right now, it's trying to set up an ABCD structure of a downside. That looks like this, but it hasn't actually generated yet, and it would take it a little bit to get down there. But on the weekly, the Russell certainly struggling compared to the NASDAQ. But even with respect to the S&P 500, this is struggling more so right now than anything else. That's here. If we look, if we take just a quick peek at a couple of other things that are interesting here, one of them is the fact that the currencies are starting to bounce in Europe. I don't know that they're going to go that far, but they're trying to bounce. There is a big range trade, so let's pull this back so we can see that. That range trade essentially, well, there's kind of 2 of them really. There's this lower one, and then there's the one up above it, and it goes to about that top, maybe a little bit lower. That's the 2 ranges off the bottom. I suspect this thing is just building out a consolidation sideways until it eventually does what it's been doing, and that is it breaks lower, which would push the dollar higher. But right now it's just a range trade. It came into, on significance here, it came into this bar. This is the big bar. Came into it, had no volume, flipped around. That kind of suggests this is going to try to move back up, maybe into these 2 bars, the intersection of those. And then that would probably demarcate the big range that it's going to trade in for a while, which is from this area down to the very lows. So that's the way that one's setting up. That's on the euro. Now the euro, if it's getting strong, the euro is going to push the dollar weaker. That's going to help your commodities. That's going to help a bunch of other dollar-denominated kinds of trades. For example, the S&P 500 would probably benefit from that. Certainly the oil market would benefit from it, and so forth. Commodities in general. So if this does get that push going, that would be beneficial. Where will it hurt? It's going to hurt the European stocks, right? They're all trade-offs now, and they're all trading off around their currencies. So that extra push lower after consolidation is what we see already starting to take place here in Japan on the yen. This thing collapses. It collapses under the swing point low. So here's your swing point low. And once it broke last week here. And then all last week was nothing but down, big spike down. If you look at this on a monthly basis, or actually on a weekly basis, the big push down, the consolidation, now the continuation. That's what I expect the euro will do. If you look at how long this played out, it was about 5.5 months. So at some point, I would think this tries to get back up here and test into this area, but that's probably all it's going to do. It's probably going to fail on that test, and if so, then it's going to propagate to the downside. What's that going to do? That's going to help, of course, whoever it's devaluing, which in this case is the Japanese yen. So it's going to help the equities in Japan. And we'll go to the world markets here in a second, and what you'll see is that the Japanese market, of course, is breaking out as the currency breaks down. If Europe does the same thing over time, then it will also do the same thing with respect to its equity market. Elsewhere, if we look at the dollar, right, dollar is going to try to push back into towards these lows, and at some point I would think the dollar will find support. You can see the big bars here somewhere. My guess is towards the bottom end of this, so somewhere in the 24.30, excuse me, 24.90 to 25.05 or so range probably. If we look at the oil market got a little spike up. You got an OPEC meeting this week. That's going to be the key here. If you bring this back, you can see how much damage was done. What is this thing doing? Well, it looks pretty much like what we just talked about with the yen and the euro. Big spike down, consolidate, eventually, potentially, more to the downside. That's going to be the key to watch as this thing tries to roll over. You know, if it can really start to take off, and I would think maybe get over about 22.43 on the USO, so somewhere around 22.50. That would be a pretty good jump back up. Let me look at it on the monthly. Yeah, I could get as high as 25, maybe 26 at the most. But yeah, Doji running out of juice. I don't know. OPEC meeting will be the key, and I got a sneaky feeling this is going to roll right back over to the downside, independent of what the dollar's doing. Look at the bond market. Bond market's spiking back up. Had a little bit more volume. It's going to come test a swing point high, and what is it doing? It's trying to retest regen off the bearish breakdown. That's what it's into. It's got all the volume there, so as it comes back into it, has none. I would expect this thing's going to drift back down in here and then make another run over time here in the next week or so. And finally, if we look at the gold market, and then we'll go to the world equities. If we look at the gold market's a big range trade. If you look at it on the weekly, a big range trade. If you look at it on the monthly, it's consolidation at the lows. Finally, let's go to the world markets, because this is where the action is. It's really not domestic, it's international. And so if we look at the international markets, let's just flip through them all, see what they look like. I haven't really zeroed in on them all. So Australia, big spike up, big volume. This is doing a retest regen bearish, and actually looks like it's going to have the juice. Looks to me like it's going to attack that high again and potentially get over it, and if it does, then that would turn this thing sideways instead of the down. So that's the all ordinaries. Let's look at the Indian market. So Indian market was trying to push up. So India had two nice strength signs here, with this one and that one. Both of those were up days. So that was nice spikes. Now it's getting another one here. This looks like it's going to work higher. So you kind of got some ABCD structure starting to play out here, right? Up and down, right? And now another one down and up. So this is starting to look pretty good. Let's see where the bearish retest regen is. It's already got over that. So that's also another positive, saying, hey, this thing is sideways, not down on this time frame, right? The daily time frame. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Let's see what the weekly looks like. And big consolidation range. And so the key here now for the Indian market, and I keep wanting to see it come back into this bar, but I don't know if it ever get there. But we'll keep watching and see, but that's the key. So the key here now is this. These are the two zones that are in there, right? It's coming right up into this zone. It's going to attack it. Your breakdown bar was here. That's going to be the key bar on the way up. And so my guess is it's going to get into that bar, try to get to the top of it. That looks like about 28. Let's get the number on it. 28. And I'm on the Sensex. 28,539. If you get over that, stay over it, then you can go back to the highs. If not, then you're going to fall back down here and you're going to try to come back down again. And if we look at a failure case, right, now let's just say it gets to there, what would that do? That could take you fairly close to that number we've been watching. So I'm kind of curious to see if it fails here, gets the push back down to about, somewhere in this range, and that may be the best buy that's going to set up if in fact it plays out that way. Let's look at the Nifty 50 while we're here. I think it looks about the same, and it does. Let's see on the weekly. Yeah, also on the weekly. So that actually looks pretty good. Let's pop in, see what Brazil's doing. I think they've been struggling. Yes, they are. Volume's coming out of them now. And weekly doesn't look quite as bad. But yeah, it's just a big mess actually. Yeah, let's see. Anything else there? No. Let's go to China, and not China, but the CACs. Let's go to Europe. So you had a big push down on the daily, not a lot of volume. And okay, so this one had attacked. This is already a sideways trade, right? But it had attacked into this retest regen zone off this prior swing point low. Actually, the top is right there. So as it did, right, got about halfway in it, flips around, comes back down. This looks to me like it's just still consolidating. Let's look at it on a weekly, still a big consolidation there. If it comes to test these lows again and breaks them, then we could get a bigger consolidation range start to develop. Let's look at the German market. Looks the same, a little bit weaker. Volume did escalate on it comparatively. That one actually looks like it's going to try to test the lows. And yeah, that one looks a little bit weaker. And how about the FTSE while we're here? Not much there. Not much there. I don't see anything bad there. Okay, so the DAX we looked at. How about our friends up in Toronto, up in Canada? And they pushed down. They had volume. This one looks like it's going to trade down to about 14.85. And could trade lower. Could trade about 14.630, it looks like. Okay, so how about China, Hong Kong? Here's the 8 shares in China. Now, the 8 shares, as well as the Chinese market, got a pretty good hit last week. So this one's coming down to test. These are the Chinese shares listed on the Hong Kong exchange. You kind of got two ranges inside this. It's in the bottom half of it. Looks to me like it's going to try and test these lows. That looks to be the trade there for now. It can certainly bounce. Volume-wise, it's not set up great, but we really need to look at Shanghai to see that. And Hang Seng looks about the same. Really no difference. Speaking of China shares, let's look at the Shanghai market. Shanghai comes off heavy on Thursday, and as it pushes down, it gets a follow through on Friday. But this is actually a positive. So it did a couple things here. It traded into the swing point high. That was a bullish retest regenerate. Does a full test. In other words, it tests the lows, came back within 6 bars, tests the lows, has less volume than it had previously, and less volume than the breakout bar. So that to me actually looks like a good test. I expect this thing is going to bounce back up here somewhere and then come back to test some more. And so you're going to have an ABCD structure set up that brings it down a little deeper probably on the next move, but a bounce probably in between. And let's see what else. Oh, Japan we were talking about. Here's Japan breaking out, holding at the highs, a lot of volume. This actually looks like some sort of a, so they got volumes as they're expanding to the tops. That usually accompanies some sort of a top. So even though the yen's getting, demolished, the yen's probably going to try to bounce fairly soon, and this is going to try to drift in, it looks like. Still bullish, but has potentially setting up some sort of a range. Now, if it really is setting up a range, then that yen itself is going to set up a range instead of just, punishing itself to the downside. It's already been punished enough, so a slow drift of a downside might be more of what we can expect. Taiwan, this one has become a mess, and still holding the highs, but yeah, it looks like it can bounce a little bit, but I don't know how far that's going to go. Indonesia, haven't looked at this in a while, so they're breaking down and coming back in to do a retest regen off the prior high. That'd be the second test, so the probabilities are only about 50% there to hold. Finally, Korea I haven't looked at in a while, and this one doesn't look too bad. Yeah, this just looks like a consolidation, another potential retest regen, and then probably move back up again. That's it. That's a fast look at the world in 20 minutes. So what do I think is going to happen this week? I think you're going to see continued sideways, slightly positive bias. We got a lot of data this week economically, a lot of data in terms of central banks, in terms of PMIs, ISMs, so forth. You've got the OPEC, you've got the Greek situation. There's enough crosswinds out here to make this thing move either way or both. And I wouldn't be surprised if it does both. Have yourself a great week. Let's make some money. If I can give you some help, give me a holler. Matter of fact, come over to the site, become a member, and I'll help you immensely. Have a great night. Take care.